Gosh, I love that song. How did you know? How did you know?
Oh my God, the speakers today have made me feel really safe and that the future's in good hands. Thank you for joining us for our next panel, Love and Robots, all about how tech is reshaping human relationships. We have quite a brains trust here today. Look, from dating app concierges to comment sections filled with heated debate, there is no doubt that human relationships have undergone some significant changes over the decade. It seems like we have more ways to connect than ever, but is that connection real or just a simulation? Hopefully we get some answers today. I just want to do some introductions. Do you mind going across the panel and telling us a little bit about what you do? Starting with you, Dr. Sarah McKay.
Oh, thank you. So I'm Sarah, I'm a neuroscientist. Like Chelsea, I had my sort of start in the medical research lab, but I now run my own company doing education in applied neuroscience and brain health for professionals, psychologists, therapists and teachers. And I've got a particular interest in women's brain health. I've written a couple of books looking at sort of how we navigate as mammalian humans through the female lifespan, through puberty, pregnancy, menopause and into old age. So very interested in kind of that human aspect of our brains.
I'm Kath. My background is the humanities and social sciences. I don't have a tech background. I am a professor of media and communication. And my work recently has involved working with sexual health organisations, thinking about the kind of everyday digital and data practices that are part of people's sexual health and well-being in the kind of contemporary space.
I liked my intro. Best-selling author, award-winning podcaster, but I would say I'm a professional opinion haver. I have a lot of thoughts about a lot of things, and the internet has been the perfect outlet for me to just like word vomit, but also crowdsource and data mine and get to not only the bottom, because I don't want to go to the bottom, but I'm trying to understand the symptoms of just being people. We keep talking and talking and talking about our, I guess, like, the negatives about existing, whether it's love is hard, connection is difficult, I'm so lonely, but these are all symptoms, and I find that if we never get to the root of the issue, then we're just going around in circles, and I would like for us to be happy and hot.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah. Dr. Albury, I do want to start with a big picture question for you. We were discussing this just backstage, but what kind of social changes have academics observed over the last 10 years that have changed the way tech makes us communicate, see each other, have conversations? Could you go into that for us?
Yeah, I mean, I have been researching sexuality and gender online since online was, chat rooms and basically internet porn. I mean, that was the origin of the research that I was doing. But the changes more recently, I think, have been about the ways that people imagine choosing or connecting or finding other people. I don't think there's essential changes in the ways they actually do connect with other humans, but the imagination of possibilities. And in some cases that's great. So for a single parent who doesn't have a babysitter, to be able to connect with new friends or partners online is a wonderful thing. And they might form temporary or long-term relationships through that, but for someone to kind of harass someone anonymously or, troll them or send them unsolicited nudes, is a bad thing. So those are the kinds of changes we see. The tech changes, but the people don't necessarily change, I wouldn't say.
The same historical problems as ever.
Yeah.
How to get people to be nicer to one another. Dr. McKay, I'd love to ask you about the effects of screen time on younger generations. A recent study came out saying that the average toddler is losing the ability to hear 1,000 words a day spoken because adults around them are spending too much time on their phones. What kind of impact does excessive screen time have on the brain, particularly when you're a young person?
Yeah, I was really interested when you brought that study up about the toddlers learning 1,000 words less or hearing 1,000 words less a day, and they use some really cool tech to be able to get that data out. But I think what's interesting there is if we look at how we have evolved to learn language and what technology is sort of interfering with that natural learning process. And as we understand some pretty typical developmental trajectories of how brains develop. And when little children are learning how to talk, they are almost innately primed to want what we call serve and return interactions. They are asking you to speak to them. They are not passive receivers of language via screens. What they need is real life, in-person, warm human interactions. And they point and they ask and they interact. And if you've ever had little children in your life, it is utterly exhausting because they're constantly wanting from you, because that is how we have evolved to learn language. That is what our brains fundamentally require. And so we've got now what we call this kind of technoference, where we as adults may be spending more time on screens, or we're parking small children in front of screens. And like, we need to get shit done. That is sometimes what we've got to do. But we've now got data showing that what children are missing out on when they are either have the adults around them on screens or they themselves are on screens, they're not learning in that way that our brains evolved to, which is through real in-face, in-person communications and conversations that are going back and forward. So I think it's quite scary to hear that. I would hope that most parents, when they hear that, it does make them feel uncomfortable, and sometimes that little bit of knowledge is enough to sort of start shifting the behaviours.
And that's a great point, and it actually does lead me to my next question, which is almost every state premier in New South Wales and now the Prime Minister is suggesting that people under the age of 16 don't go on social media or have access barred to them. I'd love to get your take on that. What kind of brain, I guess, functions are we missing out on when we don't use these technologies or versus when we do?
Yeah, this conversation's just taken off, and even in the last week, I even saw Barack Obama tweet out about, or X out or whatever, about it yesterday, saying that we need, it's almost like suddenly everyone's started to have, this is our latest thing to worry about. And I think the knee-jerk reaction is, let's get all kids off social media, and I can see how that would be seen as sort of the easiest solution. But I think we've got a lot of, we've got decades, we've got centuries of experience of what happens when we try and prohibit anything, whether it be an addictive substance, whether it be cigarettes or alcohol, or whether it's just picking up that phone, which we all love so much and we've become very, very attached to. If we try and prohibit access to that, I've got teenage sons. They find their way around all kinds of things. Like, I'm not naive enough to think if I said you can't go on social media till you're 16, they're not going to find their way around it, because that is how they connect and communicate. So I think we need to kind of be quite cautious, and we do need to look at what some of the research is showing about how young people are using phones, are using social media, and how they're connecting. Is a blanket ban going to be the solution? Is there some other way around that? We know an awful lot about what works in terms of behaviour change. We know simply telling people that something is not good for them is next to useless in terms of behaviour change. It really has to be kind of tackling this kind of habitual access that we have to the phones. Schools have got a part to play. One of the reasons why my boys go to the high school they do was because they had very, very strict digital they had very, very strict mobile phone access policies, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted them to go there. We've got, the big tech giants. How are they going to help us with this problem, with, not making it so accessible and so easy? But simply just blanket banning it, I think, is a bit of a knee-jerk reaction at this stage, and we're going to have to start being a little bit more sophisticated, thinking about what are the kids using it for. It's not a blanket ban.
Yeah.
It's being a little bit more incisive about what are we using it for and why, and who's using it in different ways, and how can we navigate that for the young people.
And I see Flex shaking her head at the idea of a blanket ban. So I actually have two questions for you. One, what is your take on not letting young people use social media? And two, social media has also given way to quite polarizing dating advice. I know you recently talked about the death of chivalry. What advice do you have for young people to navigate this overly analysed world when it comes to dating?
Well, I think a blanket ban is really it's really symbolic of the fact that they don't understand the issue. The addiction and the addictive behavior has already been set in stone, it's seeded, and people are not really conscious of even why they personally are using the internet. So to try and like trickle down this like very parentified version of like, just take them off, and then, you know, they'll seek greener pastures offline. It's like, have you seen the world? Things are kooky out here too. So I think there needs to be a lot more of a clear understanding about like, what are we meant to be using it for? And also like, what does it mean to misuse social media? Because like, I spend, what's my screen time looking like? 12, 14 hours. When I do it, profound, okay? When the children do it, they've got attention issues. So let's just like quickly understand what we mean when we say there's a problem, and then from there, figure out like, in a, I wouldn't say a one-to-one way, but I don't think a blanket solution works for anything ever. And yes, the death of chivalry. Okay, I need to find a way to like synthesize this. But people have been saying for ages that like the feminists killed chivalry, that feminists made society so difficult and uncomfortable for men to be in that their only solution was to take back any of the good graces, any of the nice gestures they were doing beforehand freely of their own volition. False. Lies. So I've been doing little Googles, right? I'm like, okay, but why did chivalry exist to begin with? We've got to think about the environment in which knights needed to be there, people who'd be symbols to society on what is good conduct, what is good behavior. And so you pedestalize these people and you say, look to them. They do good things. They're articulate, they're moral, they're ethical, and they go out of their way to create safe environments for their community. Sick, right? But the thing is, if there are 1,000 knights in a community and 10,000 people, there aren't really enough ethical and moral ways to show that you are a good person. So what do you get? You get courtly love. These men using women as tools to show that we are good people, creating environments and scenarios to say that, hey, I'm going to do something good for that woman, and not just any woman, because not every woman got this treatment. It was noble women. And why were women noble? Because of their proximity to some man. She was a daughter of a noble guy, a wife of a noble guy, not just because she was a woman, okay? So then you have to think, oh, it was never about women. I mean, that's where we got romance, right? Everyone's like, oh, these knights are so nice to women, they're so romantic. Not the case. So then you have to think, okay, in a society where men were trying to show to other men that they were good men, worthy men, noble men, by their proximity to women, noble women, when society changes, when knighthood stops, when there's no initiative or incentive to start treating women well, what happens? The average man can't see the incentive in going out of his way to treat a woman well, and so he doesn't. But you can't say that under a patriarchy, because the fundamental structure that upholds patriarchy is this benevolent sexism. Well, we couldn't do this without women. Well, we couldn't be in the offices without my wife at home tending to my kid. She's amazing. So, full circle mode, the death of chivalry changes with how we subjugate women. When there's no imaginary woman to treat well, because it's too much effort to treat a real woman well, but when the notion of treating women well doesn't get you what you need in society, you stop, right? Let it settle for a second, because it took me 6 months to get there.
Yeah.
But so, revisit the second question. Where were you going with that? Because I needed to let you know what I thought about chivalry. Yes.
Yeah, the second question was, how do young people navigate dating in a world that's so analysed, especially online?
I mean, I think we've always been analysing dating experiences, but I think it's always been from the bottom up. I would never want a marriage like those people, or I would want it to be in a relationship like those people, but those people were our small community or fictional people on TV, and now we're playing those same games with real people's lives. I think the issue about the dating conversations that happen online, though, is that they're done in an aspirational way, and aspiration isn't always positive. I mean, there is some kind of delusion with aspiration. Aspiration is the things you aspire to have often comes with a lack of context as well. You're looking outwards to something and you're projecting all of these positives onto it because it's anywhere but here, and here is not good. And so I think what happens with these dating conversations, again, they're really symptomatic. They take out all of the context that makes it so we are having these conversations. If the structure of patriarchy was working well, and, as patriarchy suggests, men are creating a safe environment for women and everybody's paired up and everybody's good, then we wouldn't be having these conversations. So people are aware that something isn't working, but we're all internalizing the issue and we're making it an individual problem. So when we all get on the internet and we have these really granular, symptomatic conversations, it's just not helpful. You're not talking about dating. You're talking about patriarchy. You're never talking about dating. You're talking about the way the world demeans women, the way that women can understand that their place in the world is somehow often tied to not men, but maleness, and this inherent dissatisfaction with dating goes hand in hand with this idea that the narrative we've been sold about the way we're meant to live life is thwarted. Something is off, but people don't get why. And I think the tricky thing is, it's not fair to people who've been sold this really exciting projection of their future. It's not fair to say, don't think about dating, don't talk about dating, but you can't change the system on your own. We get into capitalism. We won't. You can't change the system on your own. So I think the conversations are helpful, but only if you're actually talking about the elephant in the room. You're not talking about somebody didn't text you back, or that you're not talking about 50-50, you're talking about equity, right? You're talking about parity. You're talking about the systems and structures in place that make it so the way that you upwardly mobile is your proximity to some man. And unless you're having that conversation, the details of the romance don't make sense.
I mean, it seems like not even dating is safe from the patriarchy and capitalism. It's enmeshed into it.
Yeah.
Look, that does lead me to my next question. We have a generation that's lonelier than ever. They're communicating more online, and we will likely see the start of human-robot relationships in our lifetime.
I quite like it.
Look, if anyone here has spoken to ChatGPT, it sounds so realistic, and they're so...
I only learned that you could speak it just when you said
It is
that.
amazing.
I type into it.
I've asked him questions like, how do I ask my partner to be better at communication? And he's telling me, Nikki, you're valid, you're so right, let me tell you. And I'm like, okay, maybe I should be dating you instead. But Kath, what are the moral and ethical, obligations we have when we talk about robot-human relationships and AI relationships?
I'll jump back a second to what just said. I think if we're talking about moral and ethical obligations, fundamentally, we don't actually live in a culture that has ubiquitous digital inclusion yet. Not everyone has a device, not everyone... And the reason that matters when we're talking about bans and this kind of thing is not everyone can access government services, education, and health, because so much of that's been digitized. So I just want to kind of bring it down from the abstract to kind of the material day-to-day life. The fundamental access is still not there for a lot of people in Australia, and I work with researchers who run a regular survey called the Digital Inclusion Index, and that makes very sobering reading when you see how many households do not have digital access. From there, I will answer your question though. I work on a sex tech project where I am the person who does not work on robots, because sex robots are still like $3,000. I think the part of sex tech and intimacy tech that I'm really interested in is, the vibe that someone gets that connects to an app that they can use remotely with their lover, and whether that works or not, or whether it just ends up in the bedside table with the dead Fitbit that they didn't work properly either. I think there's lots of talk about AI right now and potential issues of kind of perpetuating misogyny or other attitudes that exist in training data. Definitely, we know, where early chatbot experiments were very racist or very misogynist because of the way they'd interpreted data scraped from Twitter and places like that, where there's a lot of that language and a lot of that culture. But in the research that I have done, where people have talked about using AI chat, it's been really interesting because it was about a safe place to experiment with their gender expression. So for example, people who had perceived themselves or been perceived by others as one gender their whole lives, but had a sense that maybe they had another gender within them, and it was a place where they could be perceived by another in that gender, but in a sense it was sort of journaling for them. It was like, what would it be like to have myself reflected back as a woman when I've always been perceived as a man? Where that person got to, though, is what I need is community. I need real life community. That's where I can learn about this. So in a sense, it was a stepping stone to connection with gender diverse community where they could explore that in a richer way. So I guess that's highs and lows of the ethical and moral questions for me.
I mean, here's a bit of a worrying statistic, but as of May 2024, the term AI girlfriend has reached a search volume of 135,000 a month, which is just fills me with dread. Dr. McKay, I want to ask you a little bit about, I guess, immersive experiences, augmented reality. It's very likely that that will become part of the digital dating process and courting process. What impact does it have on our brains? Do the same parts of our brains light up when we have those interactions online as in real life, or not?
They don't. In short, I'm really interested in how humans connect and what happens in our brains when we build trust and rapport, and you're with someone and you feel like you get each other. And we're starting to understand, we're able to kind of do almost like what we call dual brain scanning, where we can record from two brains at the same time, and we can look at what happens when strangers meet, when lovers are connecting, when two people are strumming a guitar in a band together. What is it that when you feel like you're vibing with someone is happening in your brains? And the phrase, we're on the same wavelength, nicely explains what happens when two brains connect. We see brainwave patterns synchronise. And we're now starting to understand what are the signals. It's not ESP, but what is it that's allowing two people to connect? And we've always known, intuitively, that it's eye gaze, that when I meet your eye and you meet mine, but it's not the two of us looking straight into each other's eyes like that. It's like looking away and breaking gaze and coming back. And in fact, a little bit of side eye is a very, very powerful way in which we can synchronise two brains. We know that when we are sharing attention, when we're singing together, or we're looking at a movie together, or when our bodies are perhaps moving in time, like when armies get soldiers to march, we know that facilitates synchrony. But there's one particular cue that we've recently learned about, and that is we are mammals. We are really no different to our dogs that get excited when we come home. That one of the powerful signals we've got is the sense of smell, is that we share our body odours with each other, and that's a really powerful way in which we synchronise with each other. Now, a lot of those signals are completely obliterated when we are connecting via screen. And we can do studies when we've got people who know each other well, say a mother and a child, record their brainwaves when they're interacting and communicating, and we see that their brains are completely synchronised. You could put a mother and a child and get them to Zoom with each other, or put them in different rooms and get them to connect digitally, and you'll see almost all of that synchrony obliterated. Because we're mammals, you can't smell each other via a screen. You can't make eye contact with someone via a screen. If you're on Zoom, you're looking at the camera, or you're looking at yourself half the time, or you're looking at the other people. There's no eye-to-eye contact. There's certainly no side-eye. That would be really weird if you tried to do that on Zoom, or via a screen, or even via your mobile phone. But that's how we used to do it in the olden days. That's how I met my husband, over a bottle of gin. There's a lot of side-eye going on back in the 90s. It's far more efficient than what everyone's trying to do now. So what we see is this, it's great and it's exciting, but we didn't evolve that way. We evolved to connect with each other in person. And screens, as far as what we've got, the data from the neuroscience is showing, is that synchrony is obliterated. It is very, very, very hard to recreate that with technology. Good luck, but I would rather the little bit of side-eye and having a bit of a sniff of someone.
Wait, so
amazing.
When we say that we're feeling in sync with someone, that's not a figure of speech.
It was a figure of speech, but as it turns out, literally our brainwaves synchronise. So when you're on the same wavelength, or you're in sync, literally, we would see people's heart rates start to synchronise. We see people's breathing rates synchronise. If we are moving our bodies in time, you're dancing with someone, then you'll synchronise. And when sometimes you really quickly synchronise with someone, they're probably more biologically similar to you in some way, than when perhaps, you know, you meet someone and you just kind of can't, like, you just like kind of don't vibe. It may be that you would need to spend more time together, or perhaps if you went and marched around together or danced together, you would synchronise. But it's really cool that the language we have used is so nicely reflected in the neuroscience data coming in.
It's so wild how most of this is so inherent though, because anybody who's ever said anything bad about a dating app, it's that same fact, I can't catch a vibe, like I don't really know what it is. It's like, it's not their voice, it's not like their smell, I just like don't get, I can't humanize them, it's all gone. And I get the same feeling every time my therapist is like, do you want to do a Zoom session? I don't, actually. I don't.
You're connecting with a phone, you're not connecting with a person, you're connecting with a plastic device in your hand. And that's not what our brains know what to do with.
That is so real.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I was at drinks with my friends recently, and we looked around and realized we had all met our long-term partners on the same dating app. And it's
Don't
funny.
name them, no free press.
No free press, obviously. But it is interesting because when we go out now, we usually just talk to our friends we already know. We have our phones and we're connecting with our friends who might not be in the vicinity of us. But I don't know the last time I've had a conversation with someone just at a bar. Look, we are running out of time, so I want to get to some of the audience questions because we've got some great ones. I want to start off with one which was, recent US data showed that nearly half of Gen Z were actually receptive to dating an AI partner. How will relationships evolve in a time of literally love and robots? I mean, we did touch on this a little bit, but Kath, I'd love to get your take on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think how we see AI partners in movies like Her and the capacity AI partners actually have to be in relationship with us. It's not necessarily, like, you know, I'm open to living in house, moving castle, very much so.
Real.
It doesn't mean I can. So it's, you know, it's questions like that, you know, in a marketing survey, yes, fantastic. But in terms of if we talked with people who were in relationships with AI, there might be very different concrete things they were getting from it in a particular period in time where it was really valuable for them, and then other times when, yeah, the material contact with a breathing human was what they wanted. I will say though, for some neurodivergent people, the idea of a doll or a robot or a model or an anime partner is very compelling, and it's part of their experience of neurodivergence. So that's a different category again, which I have no expertise in, but I'm very aware it's a different space, yeah.
Gosh, so fascinating.
Don't you think it's because people are missing proof of concept that dating and love actually works? In the same way that a lot of people become disillusioned with like the corporate space, because it's like before I was in it, I thought it was gonna be pumping. I would get my corner office and, you know, I'd wear my cute little outfit. But then I got there and it's like, oh, we're hot desking. Oh, okay, cool. The boss doesn't know me, fine, all good. So similarly, dating and love and the prospect of that is a concept, and you can't sell someone or get someone to like bank on the idea that it's going to work, especially because people who are partnered often do really poor PR of partnership. Like when you talk to married people about being married, the first thing, oh, you know, the ball and chain and all that. Okay, I don't want to talk about
Talk to me after this.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I bring some
I've
of
got
that.
25 years of good stories for you.
That's it. So we need the PR to start changing, and also what you were saying before about this idea that the language we use to narrate our life does change the way our life becomes. We're using phrases like in sync, and then all of a sudden we find out our brains are syncing with people we like. So it's like, I don't think it's a top-down approach, but I think if our discussions start changing and people become more responsible for the dating experiences they're having, I think we all really struggle with like playing our role. We're all waiting to be in some ways picked, or for like the narrative of romance to choose us. And up until that happens, everybody's just like sitting and waiting. Go find someone to sync with.
Gosh, we could talk about this forever, but unfortunately we have run out of time. Thank you so much, guys, and thank you to the audience for your amazing questions.